shut off the whole row.
Yeah, we can shut off the whole room.
Can we? That's great, thank you. And thank you, Chairman Couch and Supervisor Simons, for this opportunity to speak before the joint board this evening. My name is Peter Guldberg. I'm a sound consultant with 35 years of experience. I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics from MIT, and a master's of atmospheric science from the University of Michigan. I'm qualified as an expert on noise in court and before public service boards in many states. I performed sound studies of wind turbines on over 40 projects. I've also served as an independent consultant to town planning and zoning boards in several states regarding the effects of wind turbines, the sound effects of wind turbines, and I've assisted towns in writing wind ordinances. Great Lakes Wind and Exelon have asked me to present information on our sound studies for the proposed Blissfield wind energy project this evening. Just an outline, I'm going to be talking about the terms we use in discussing sound, presenting some new information on existing sound levels here in Riga, discussing how we predict turbine sound levels with an acoustic model. We'll discuss the low frequency and infrasound issues and what I believe are appropriate sound limits. Sound pressure levels are put on a decibel scale from 0, which is the hearing threshold, up to about 120 to make it easy for us to understand. And all sounds, of course, originate from a source. Here are some common ones. Standing 100 feet from a truck on a roadway, 80 decibels. Near a tractor, 85. A conversation between two people without amplification, 65 decibels. This gentleman is hearing my voice. Standing under an aircraft taking off, 100 decibels. A car 50 feet away, traveling by, 75 decibels. Tree frogs or peepers in the spring, if it ever gets warm enough for them in the spring, 55 decibels. Standing behind a lawnmower, 95, a quiet suburban area, 45 decibels. This is a nice summary chart of some of the sound levels we encounter in everyday life in a rural area. And note that every 10 decibel change on this scale represents a doubling of loudness. So we have a quiet rural area at night, where the lowest sound levels might typically be 35 decibels. Suburban area typically 45 decibels. We'd spoken about an unamplified voice, private conversation 65, a tractor at 85 decibels. What are the proper sound measures? A-weighted decibels are universally used for community sound studies. And why is that? Because dBA mimic the response of the ear for sounds in the low range where we hear most of the sounds in everyday life. When we're talking about wind turbines, we're talking about sound levels in the range of 25 to 45 decibels that people would experience in Riga Township from this project. Those are low range decibels, and the A-weighted scale is appropriate for representing those. Opponents of this project will claim that C-weighted decibels should be used. C-weighted decibels should not be used. They're not valid. The fathers of modern acoustics, Bolt, Beranek, and Newman, in their classic handbook on noise ratings, state that the C scale was developed for very loud noise over 85 decibels. So those very loud noises we hear differently from the lower noises. And that's what the C scale was developed for. So applying the C scale to the low level of sound from a wind turbine is scientifically invalid. It's highly inappropriate. What happens when you do that? If you apply the C scale, you artificially inflate the low frequency sound. And in fact, in the lowest two frequency bands, you would inflate the low frequency sound by 36 to 48 decibels. So the opponent's use of C-weighted decibels creates fictitious low-frequency sound for wind turbines. Now that we've established the fact that A-weighted sound levels are the only proper measure for a community sound study of wind turbines, I want to share with you some measurements of existing sound levels that were taken last fall during the week of November 29th. Sound levels were made at many locations in the project area in the 3 townships, including Riga. At that time, the leaves were off of the trees. Most farming activity had ceased, and there was no sound from summer insects. So it was a very quiet time. In fact, it was about a week and 10 days before the snows first came. There are 2 stations for which I want to show some information tonight. One is on the property of Getz on Riga Highway south of East Horton Road, and the other is property owned by the Beagle family on Thompson Highway south of Weston Road. We selected a week where the winds were continuously in the full range of turbine operation. So the winds up at the hub height were 13 to 29 miles an hour. Now we need to understand that wind turbines only operate when the winds up at the hub height are 10 miles an hour or higher. And the maximum turbine sound level, that's what everybody focuses on. We're always talking about the maximum sound impact. That only occurs when the winds up at the hub height are 23 miles an hour or higher. So it's important to understand that the sound from the turbine varies with the wind speed. When it first starts up, it's putting out very little sound. When it gets to 23 miles an hour or higher up at the hub height, it puts out the maximum amount of sound. So we were fortunate to have selected a week when the winds at the hub height were in that full range. The surface winds on those days, as measured at Adrian Airport, were from near calm to 17 miles an hour. So I've summarized those numbers here in this slide. Surface winds were close to calm to 17 miles an hour during the time we took these measurements. The hub height winds were 13 to 29 miles an hour. So the next 4 graphs are going to illustrate what the existing sound levels are in Riga Township and how wind turbine sound for this project might compare to that. We're going to start with station number 1, which was on the Getz property. And just to orient you here, I want to show you that the sound level is along the vertical axis here from 30 to 75 decibels. And the wind speed at hub height is here from 10 miles an hour up to 30 miles an hour. And we've got colored dots. Actually, there's 6 different colors here. So let's start with the lower dots. Each dot represents 1 hour of measurements. The blue and green dots represent what we call the L90 sound levels, or the quietest 10% of the time. To give you an example of that, if you go out at night, and occasionally there might be traffic going by on the road where you live, and then there will be a period of time when there's no traffic for maybe 2 minutes, and all the cars have disappeared into the distance. And you say, gosh, it's really quiet right now. That's the L90 sound level, and those are the blue dots at night, the green dots during the day, the quietest 10% of the time. So we see them down here at the bottom of the graph. Now the next set of dots are the yellow and orange ones in the middle, and those represent what we call the energy average sound levels. The energy average sound levels are what we hear when you say, gosh, how loud was it out there? Usually what you're referring to is the average sound level. And then the purple and red dots up there are the loudest 10% of the time. Those are called L10 sound levels. So we have the loudest 10% of the time, the energy average in the middle, and the quietest interval 10% of the time at the bottom there. Now you'll notice that the average and loudest sound levels are just kind of scattered about, and they don't bear any relationship to wind speed. And that's because most of the sound we hear here in Riga and any community in America, is determined by motor vehicle traffic. And the motor vehicle traffic really isn't a function of wind speed. But the quietest intervals are related to wind speed, because when the wind blows stronger, the turbulence noise in the atmosphere and in the trees actually influences these quietest sound levels. So we've drawn a line through here, kind of a trend line, to show you that as wind speed at the hub height increases, the quietest interval sound level goes up as well. Now, a few other things you might want to note. That quietest interval sound level, about 35 decibels at 10 miles an hour, and up here at 23, this is where I said the turbine would produce its maximum sound. It's about 43 decibels. So those are the existing quietest interval sound levels. The average sound level, if you looked at night through here, in this wind speed range, is about 52 decibels. Now you might say, gosh, you know, doesn't it ever get quieter than that in Riga? Well, maybe when there is no wind speed, there's no wind up at the hub height, you might have lower sound levels down here, but then the turbine won't be operating. So these measurements correspond to the wind speed range when the turbine could start operation up to its maximum operation. Now let's assume that the Blissfield Wind Energy Project has been built. And the owner, as you know, has agreed to meet a 45 decibel limit at non-participating occupied structures. So the red circles I've added onto this graph here show the maximum turbine sound level at different wind speeds. This allows you to put the sound from the wind turbine project into context of what the existing sound levels are here in Riga. So let's start by going to that point in the graph at 23 miles an hour, where the turbine would produce the maximum sound. So I put a circle here at 45 decibels. But let me tell you that when we do the layout for this project, based on acoustic modeling, our firm always builds in a 2 decibel safety margin. So in fact, the expected maximum sound level would be a little lower around here at 43. Now, when the winds are at 23 miles an hour up at the hub, the sound level is not always going to be this high. This, in fact, is the maximum. So the actual sound levels for this condition are going to be along a line that runs from this point downward through here. Now, at middle wind speeds, the turbine puts out less sound. And again, the actual sound levels will be on a line that runs downward through here. At the startup, when the turbine first starts to spin, the maximum sound level here is around 33 decibels, and it runs downward through here. So you see that as the wind speed increases, the quietest interval sound level also goes up, and the wind turbine sound goes up. Now, a curious thing happens if you look over here at 30 miles an hour. When it gets even windier, the turbine doesn't put out any additional sound because it already was at its maximum at 23 miles an hour. But the quietest interval sound levels in the community do continue to rise from the wind turbulence noise in the environment.